Welcome back. We meet again after a small hiatus. Today I want to discuss a bit about giving contrast in your essays. You can give this contrast using although, even though, however, despite, in spite of. Now, there's something that really troubles me when students use although and even though. They just somehow never seem to get it right. They use it just the same way that they use however. And sometimes they use despite the same way that they use in spite of. And at other times they use it quite like although. Although these are all words that can show contrast, they are used in different ways. In terms of where they are positioned, that's fairly similar. You can definitely write it in your thesis statement. Check this out. Now, this is an essay which asks if schools should focus on teaching traditional subjects rather than vocational training. And the opinion given is using although teaching core subjects has its advantages, schools should not ignore occupational education. So here a contrast is given that teaching core subjects is important, but not at the cost of giving vocational training. You can also write them for the topic sentence of typically your second body paragraph. You can pause the video and read the two body paragraphs. This is a two body paragraph essay where the first paragraph supports teaching core subjects, whereas the second one shows that it's a mistake to ignore vocational training. The contrast between the two ideas has been highlighted by the use of however. But you can certainly start your contrasting paragraph with other sentences that might use although or despite. Finally, you can definitely use it in your conclusion as well. In fact, most conclusions can be done with a mix of even though and because. Essentially, this conclusion puts across that even though there are benefits to teaching traditional subjects, non-inclusion of job training is not good because. Now the reason is given after that why it is not good to ignore job training. The use of even though and because has effectively summarized whatever had been said in the body paragraphs. Now, other than the use of even though and because to summarize, sometimes we may also want to give a suggestion, such as in an advantages outweigh disadvantages essay question, where the drawbacks are relatively significant, we may want to give some suggestions for that. In that case, after saying that the benefits are certainly stronger, we can give a suggestion to overcome the drawbacks with the use of however. You can pause the video and read the conclusion to understand how the suggestion is relevant here. So definitely these are useful structures that you need to learn to write accurately. Now, accuracy. I like to distinguish them as transition words and phrases and conjunctions. Sometimes even conjunctions are called as transition words, but I'd like to make that distinction just for you to understand them. Transition words. Well, when you transit from one thought to another, any word that is used for that is a transition word. Now, usually when we speak about conjunctions, they join two sentences by removing the full stop. There's no longer a full stop, and then you put this word in between and it is joined as a single sentence. And these two parts are called clauses. No longer called sentences, they are called clauses. A clause would have a subject and a verb. Check out these sentences. Read these sentences and you would notice the difference when we use although in different positions. These conjunctions can come in the beginning and they can come in the middle. If they come in the beginning, the comma comes after the end of the first clause and before the beginning of the next subject. If it comes between two clauses, there's no need of a comma actually. It's not necessary. In case you feel it's a very long sentence, you can put a comma before the conjunction, but it's actually not at all necessary for you to put that comma. Now, in case of a transition word or phrase, as I prefer to call it, we don't remove that full stop. We let that full stop remain and we start the word with a capital letter and we put that word, and after that, just before you write the next subject, you put a comma. And that comma is necessary. You cannot avoid it. If you do, you lose marks in terms of accuracy in grammar. The problem is students using although in place of however, and however in place of although. But you must remember that accuracy is extremely important in IELTS. If you're not accurate with your sentence structures, if you make even a small mistake of a full stop and a comma in IELTS, it's an inaccurate sentence. It's not an error-free sentence, and you will lose marks for that. So please understand this aspect of IELTS and diligently work on your accuracy with these sentences. Now, when it comes to despite and in spite of, the difference is these are prepositions, prepositional phrases. So they're not used the same way as a conjunction. That is, with these prepositional phrases, we don't have a clause, a proper clause with a subject and a verb. It would usually have only a noun. So typically your sentence would look like this. The comma rule in this case is the same as that of although and even though. I hope this clears some of your confusion related to how to use these words, where to use it in an IELTS essay, and how to use it accurately. One more tip, however is actually more formal than even though and although. So in speaking, you can use more of although, even though, rather than however. You can use it, but use it sparingly in speaking.
Now the reason why we didn't discuss but or though is because they are used more in speaking, quite like in spite of. Now when it comes to though, it's used the same way as although, but it's a shortened version of although. So that's the reason why it's not considered as formal as although. Now with regard to the levels of formality, you do need to remember that but, though and in spite of are followed by despite, although and even though, which are almost in the same category, with even though being used wherever you want to give more emphasis to the contrast, for example in conclusion, where you want to emphasize your opinion. And finally you have however, nonetheless and nevertheless. These are very much formal and are used mostly in writing. Now the reason why but is not favored as much in writing is because it's not flexible. For example, it cannot be used in the beginning of a sentence. It's actually a conjunction, but it's a different kind of conjunction called a coordinating conjunction. You don't really have to remember the terminology, but you just have to remember that in this kind of conjunction, the comma right before it is necessary. That doesn't mean you cannot use it in writing. You can use it sparingly depending on how your essay progresses, particularly when you've exhausted the other options.
That's it for now. See you with another sentence type in the next video. Bye-bye.